welcome to the very last episode of Research Without Tears. I'm so glad you made it this far, and we're going to talk here about your final draft. You're so close to being done. Good for you. And I'm going to try to help you finish strong and ensure that you get the grade that you want and that you deserve. So we're going to talk first about doing a complete and on-time final draft, and then we'll talk about what next. So you hopefully have developed your paper significantly beyond the rough draft stage. We looked at it, I gave you some feedback, I suggested some routes for you to take for more research or more development of your ideas, and you've incorporated all of that and rewritten or written some new information. You also need to check that you have the correct number of words, and when you do a word count, you really don't want to count the works cited list or the heading, all of that information about what class you're in and what my name is. That stuff doesn't count, and I won't count it when I do my word count. So make sure that you have the minimum number. There is no maximum. I'll read whatever you turn in, so don't worry about going over. Going over is usually a sign that you really got into your research, and it makes me happy, so that's a good thing. You also need to make sure that you have the correct number of citations and the number and type of sources. I usually specify you need to have at least this many citations, you need to have at least this many sources, and only so many can be internet, so many need to be books. Really keep that in mind because that can sink you, and you don't want to be sunk after doing all of this work. Also check to make sure that you've answered all of the questions that the assignment asked you to address, that you didn't just kind of leave off the last question because you couldn't find anything. If you couldn't find anything, then come and get help fast so that you can find some stuff. You also need to check that you've used MLA style properly, both within the paper on your internal citations and also on your works cited. And then you need to make sure that every piece of cited material is intelligently and gracefully worked into your narrative, and that your narrative flows smoothly and evenly through the required points, it comes to a conclusion. You don't just throw information in there and hope that it connects. You're in charge, you're driving this truck, and you're connecting all of that information that's being carried in your paper. You also want to proofread your paper and make sure that you're not just depending on a spell checker. You want to actually look for those little errors that crop in and then have somebody else proofread your paper just to triple check. And then you also want to do a triple check on your MLA formatting. Make sure that you have the punctuation in the right place. Make sure that you're indenting on your works cited list, the second and third line. All of those things that are details that could make the difference between an A and a B. And then make sure that you're going to deliver it on time. Usually I ask for it at the beginning of a class period, and by 5 o'clock that day I want to make sure that you've also posted it on turnitin.com. So you need to kind of hit both that, the print version and the online version, in order for me to grade your paper. So you did it. It's like a race and you won it. So what happens next? I need a little time, depending on how heavy my workload is and how many students I've got in your class and other classes, to check your resources, to look at the online version and look at the source use and Turnitin's plagiarism check. And then I need some time to grade your paper and think about it. Sometimes to give you a really fair reading, I read it and then I read it again, then I make comments, then I look at the grading matrix. So I usually take a fair amount of time with each paper. So I try to get it back quickly, but there may be a wait. You should definitely save any library books that you have, because once in a while a question comes up on Turnitin and something that's on a website was taken from your book, but it's appearing on a website, which makes me want to make sure that it's also in your book. So I sometimes need to check your books. So hold on to your book for another day or another couple days. And then once I get it graded, hopefully you got the A that you deserve, you can move on, you can celebrate your success, you can tell people that it's possible in my class to do research without tears and to survive the experience. And then we're all happy.